Tamil protests continue today right here in Canada. In fact, right now, crowds are gathered outside the Ontario Legislature and the Sri Lankan consulate in downtown Toronto. This comes after hundreds of protesters crowded onto Toronto's Gardiner Expressway last night, stopping traffic for hours on one of Canada's busiest highways. Well, last night's blockade comes after months of persistent protests by members of the Tamil community. Joining me now to talk about that is Phillip Koneswaran. He is the Vice President of International Tamil Radio. It broadcasts in Canada and in Europe. Phillip, good to see you. Thank you
for having me here.
Let's just begin by getting a sense of what you have call-in shows. So you have a way to plug into the broader Tamil community in Canada, which is quite large, something around 250,000 people. How would you describe the reaction within that broad community? Is it unified? Is there dissension?
Well, what I can say is that the Tamil community itself may be divided in how, in its political stance. A majority of them will, as an example, support the LTTE. There may be some that don't, and so on. But I think I speak for all Tamils when I say that we are uniformed in our stand against the killing of civilians in Sri Lanka. What I mean by that is that over the last couple of months, we have seen an extreme rise in the number of deaths in civilians. That is both in the firing area as well as the so-called safe regions, camps. And what we're trying to do through these protests is to bring some attention to the deaths of civilians.
So everyone is unified, you would argue, in not wanting to see the deaths of further innocents. But what about the situation of the Tamil Tigers, who are a militant separatist group, who have over the years carried out numerous suicide bombings and numerous attacks against the state of Sri Lanka? Is there any uniformity in support for that organization?
Well, yes, there is, because unfortunately at the moment, with the lack of the international community helping Tamil people, the only organization that is standing up for the Tamils are the LTTE. And it has been so for the last 30 years. No one else has come forward to look at, hey, what's happening in Sri Lanka? What is happening to this clear minority? Why are they disappearing? Why do we never hear from people that are imprisoned? The LTTE has been the only force that has been representing the Tamils. I'm not saying that they should be the only ones. I'm not saying that every Tamil supports them, but this is the fact that they have been the force that has been representing us.
When people call in to the radio call-in shows on your network, what are you hearing from them about the role of Canada in this whole?
Well, see, Canada is home to about 250,000 Tamils, and although we are mostly all very Canadian, but we're first, second generation Canadians. We have very, very strong ties to our homeland. Many people have relatives, families, and so on that have disappeared, that have been killed in the recent months, and our community here in Canada is under a lot of emotional stress right now. We need the government of Canada to step in and say, okay, we're going to do the best we can to protect civilian lives in Sri Lanka.
Right. Well, we just had Bev Oda in Sri Lanka, the minister responsible. She's just come back. It came up again in Parliament today. What more could it be reasonably expected of the Canadian government?
I don't think we're asking for military action. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, as an example, in 2008, government of Canada itself did about $120 million of exports to Sri Lanka and about $300 and some odd million of imports from Sri Lanka. What we're asking maybe is to put more pressure on the government to protect human rights and to minimize civilian deaths by means of financial embargoes, through diplomatic process. We have a High Commissioner in Ottawa, and through him we can cause a lot of pressure for the government of Sri Lanka to let them know.
It honestly doesn't look like the Sri Lankan government is going to listen to anyone right now, with victory from its vantage point so close. It has the Tamil Tiger, the rump of the Tamil Tigers, confined to a 2 square mile area. They could conceivably wipe out that militant group.
Absolutely.
Within a matter of days. I have done with the problem.
Once again, I'm not going to put up an argument for why the LTTE should be saved. But what I am saying is
how much more can the Canadian government do than
for the civilians? I'm talking about civilians. I'm not talking about the LTTE. Right. What the political situation is between the government of Sri Lanka and LTTE is really an internal matter. But what I'm talking about, it is a problem for us Canadian Tamils when we see our people in Sri Lanka being killed for any reason, whether it is because the government is trying to defeat the LTTE or otherwise. The fact is the civilians are dying when the government is said, yesterday the government said that not one civilian died in the weekend attacks. I mean, that's a little difficult to believe. I don't think we need pictures. And the second problem is we've not had independent journalists or aid agencies allowed into the conflict region.
They've been shut out of the region.
And the question is why? And the question is why?
Just a final question, a very quick one. What has been most amazing here in Canada is the level of organization within the community. How has that been possible? How has it been possible to get the hundreds,
grown,
if not thousands
as a community, we've grown over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And we've, we have a lot of, we have our internal media, radio, television, newspaper, and so on. And we get a lot of information on what is happening in Sri Lanka, as opposed to what the mainstream community sees on mainstream media. As an example, I see pictures and videos of civilians that have been
never
killed.
Make it on the air.
That have been killed. Exactly. This never. Yeah. I mean, I think if for a week the mainstream media were to publish everything that we see, your questions may be different, and the way Canada sees this would change.
All right. Phillip, good talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Phillip Koneswaran is Vice President of International Tamil Radio. It broadcasts in Canada and in Europe.